Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering the news of the Church. Today is Wednesday, October 6, 2021. Some words of the Pope addressed to the Mexican people have caused uneasiness among some Spanish politicians. The Secretary of the Episcopate asked that they may be read well. Chile has just passed a law that will allow abortion up to the 14th week. The bishops have protested in vain against this new attack to human life. The Chinese Communist authorities have decided to restrict access to abortion in an attempt to stop the depopulation process in the country. An association of German lay people has warned that the church in that country is already, in fact, in a state of schism with respect to the universal church. A U.S. bishop has warned that seminaries have been admitting transgenders and has asked to check the seminarians are men. On the occasion of the bicentenary of the independence, the Pope has addressed a letter to Mexican people that has been misinterpreted and has caused controversy in Spain.
In his message to the Mexican people on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of their independence from Spain, the Pope said that it was necessary to ask forgiveness for the mistakes made. This has been interpreted by some in Spain as an attack and has caused a strong controversy. These were the Pope's words. In order to strengthen our roots, it is necessary to reread the past, taking into account both the lights and the shadows that have shaped the history of the country. Such a retrospective look necessarily includes recognizing the mistakes made in the past, which have been very painful. That is why on various occasions both my predecessors and myself have asked forgiveness for personal and social sins, for all the actions or omissions that did not contribute to evangelization. He then alluded to the Masonic persecutions against Christians, which gave rise to the uprising of the Cristeros. In the same perspective, neither can we ignore the actions that in more recent times were committed against the Christian religious sentiment of a large part of the Mexican people, causing profound suffering. Criticism towards the Pope in Spain was not long in coming, and many politicians and journalists accuse him of being unfair with the work done by Spain in Mexico. The Secretary of the Episcopal Conference, Bishop Arguello, referred to these criticisms and asked politicians to read what the Pope had said and not to be guided by newspaper headlines.
Chile will soon have a law that will allow abortions up to 14 weeks of gestation. The bishops has protested against it to no avail.
After the approval in the Chilean Chamber of Deputies of the initiative to legislate the discriminalization of abortion up to 14 weeks of gestation, the Chilean bishops deeply regretted this decision and reaffirmed their option to defend the life of the unborn. The Standing Committee of the Episcopal Conference of Chile expressed that the value of life and the dignity of the human person are an essential and inalienable foundation of life in society, adding that, as Pope Francis reminds us, the defense of the unborn is intimately linked to the defense of any human right. The bishops add that the first of human rights is the right to life, which must be respected from conception to natural death. Therefore, not deliberately and directly killing the innocent is a moral absolute whose recognition and protection is indispensable for life in humanity. Finally, the bishops reminded Catholics that the immorality of abortion is among the constant teachings of the Church, and that there is never sufficient reason to kill an innocent human being.
China will reduce the numbers of abortions performed for non-medical purposes, the Communist government announced it in order to prevent population decline.
The Chinese government has announced several measures aimed at preventing the fertility rate in the country from continuing to decline. At the moment, it is 1.7 when it is considered that the population replacement rate should be at 2.1. Among these measures is the drastic reduction of access to abortion, which would be limited to cases related to the health of the fetus or the health of the mother. Measures will also be taken to prevent unwanted pregnancies and to encourage men to share responsibility for preventing them. After years of trying to limit population growth, Beijing is promising policies aimed at encouraging larger families. In June, it said it would allow all couples to have 3 children instead of 2, as well as reducing the financial burden of raising children. Although China remains the world's most populous nation, the latest census showed that population growth between 2011 and 2020 was the lowest since the 1950s. The population is expected to start declining within a few years. Between 2014 and 2018, there were an average of 9.7 million abortions per year, an increase of about 51% over the 2009-2013 average, despite the relaxation of family planning policies in 2015 to allow each family to have 2 children.
A group of German Catholics, anthropologists, philosophers, and theologians, and journalists have warned that the Church is already in a schism in that country.
The Working Group of Christian Anthropology has published a manifesto in the face of the drift of the Synodal Assembly of the Church in Germany. It warns that, in fact, the German Church is already schismatic. The statement stresses the essential importance of being faithful to the Word of the living God, present in the Scriptures and handed down by the Church through the centuries, and assures that we will never support demands or second initiatives that dissolve or relativize the link with this Word of the living God. The manifesto proposes 9 theses. The first says that the demands in the Church are legitimate only if they are based on the gospel, on the faith of all, and have the support of the universal Catholic Church. The second reminds us that any real reform begins with conversion and spiritual renewal. The third rejects the separation of Germany from the universal Church. The fourth states that the mismanagement of abuse cases by the hierarchy has been used as an excuse to propose a reform of the power structures in the Church. The fifth thesis states that it is aberrant to interpret the assignment of priestly ministry to men as discrimination against women. The sixth point, it is recalled that the sacrament of marriage is the covenant of a woman and a man with God. The authors of the manifesto affirmed that instead of shedding light on sinful situations in order to heal them, the Synodal Assembly seeks to conform the doctrine of the Church to the current trend of the world. They refuse to offer a new sexual morality. For this reason, they reject in the seventh point of the manifesto the blessing of same-sex couples. There is a tendency to propagate a right to concupiscence for all, they say. The eighth thesis recalls what is the role of the laity and what is the role of priests. The laity must do what only the laity can do, and the priests must serve what the church calls them to and what ordination made them capable of doing. Finally, the manifesto says that sexual abuse is the millstone around the neck of the church, but they refuse to accept the abuse of abuse. The reaction to the abuses became a proxy war, which was really about the claims of a liberal ecclesiastical agenda.
Although it may seem incredible, some U.S. seminaries have admitted transgender posing as men.
Archbishop Jerome Listecki, head of the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Canonical Affairs, said bishops should consider requiring DNA testing or physical examinations to ensure that all admitted seminarians are biological male. Recently, the Committee on Canonical Affairs was alerted that a woman living under the transgender identity had been discovered to have been inadvertently admitted to the seminary or house of formation of an institute of consecrated life. The prelate said, "There appear to have been more cases." Individual sacramental records were fraudulently obtained to show their new identity, he said. In all cases, nothing in the medical records of these individuals shows past treatments or surgeries in this regard, he added. None of the biological women and seminarians have received holy orders, Bishop Listecki specified.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the almost total ban on abortion in China, compared to what is happening in the West.
Well, in the West, the culture of death advances relentlessly. This is not the case everywhere. For example, this week the Parliament of Chile has approved a new abortion law that will allow for any reason to kill the unborn up to 14 weeks of pregnancy. It is a free abortion with a law of deadlines. The Chilean bishops have protested, and it has not helped at all. It is another example of the irrelevance in which the church is. In Spain, something similar is happening. The euthanasia law has been followed by a law that aims to punish those who dare even to pray the rosary a few meters away from abortion centers. The bishops have also protested. The secretary of the Episcopal Conference, Bishop Arguello, has regretted that it is considered progressive to defend the wolf, for example, or the stork's eggs, and that instead it is considered retrograde and conservative and something that has to be forgotten to defend the life of the unborn. It is more important to defend the stork's egg than a human fetus than an unborn child. Nor has the protest of the Spanish bishops been of much use, and it is a tragedy because it is not that the church is losing privileges, but that it no longer has the capacity, unfortunately, to defend those who perhaps at a time like this only have her as the only defensive barrier, the unborn. But it is not the same everywhere. This week, it has also become known that in China, abortion has just been banned, with exceptions, those linked to the health of the mother or the fetus, that abortion will now be illegal in the Asian giant. How is this possible? Has there been a conversion of the dictators who ruled that country with an iron fist? Well, no, they have simply run numbers. China is a gigantic country with the largest population in the world. Well, they applied radical demographic policies. You could only have one child per family. And that had as an immediate consequence that many girls died in the womb of their mothers, because in the Chinese culture, the male is more valued than the female. Millions of girls were killed with abortion. There was an imbalance because there were more boys than girls, more men than women, with the foreseeable consequences. When they realized this tragic mistake, not long ago, they decided to allow families to have 2 children, and then, very soon after, they gave way to large families, still without results. China's fertility rate is at 1.7, when it is considered that the replacement rate for the population to be maintained is 2.1. For this reason, and not because they have had a pro-life conversion, by a mere calculation of interests, they have decided to ban abortion with some exceptions. If they want to follow the path they are on to become the world's leading power, they cannot afford to have a shrinking population and no young people to keep China's competitive strength, especially in its race with the United States. China's situation with a fertility rate of 1.7 is exactly the same as that of the United States or Colombia, for example. In the US and in Colombia, abortion is being promoted, considered a right, and therefore those who are defending life are attacked. Another giant, in quotation marks, not compared to the US or China, but with a very large population, which is Mexico, has already lowered its fertility rate from 2.1, I repeat, which is the replacement level. And if we look at European countries, Spain, Italy, where they are already below 1.2, far from 2.1. Therefore, well then, the future is really black. And that in Italy and Spain, and not only there, we must also mention, among others, France and Germany, that 1.2 is largely due to the children that immigrant women have, especially Muslim women, who have no problem in having large families, among other things, because they receive subsidies. That is to say, Europe, the West in general, they have not realized that even out of self-interest, they cannot kill the unborn. That to make a policy of defense of nature must also carry with it a policy of defense of human nature. As the Bishop Secretary of the Episcopal Conference of Spain said, because in the end it is more important to defend the wolf, and the farmers are not so much in agreement, and to defend the eggs of the storks than to defend human beings. It is a tragedy with consequences of all kinds. China knows very well what it is doing. It wants to be the first world power, and it is aware that it will not be able to keep up with the pace of growth by putting satellites on the far side of the moon or filling the world with its products if it does not have children, if they have no future, if there is at least a survival rate, if those who are born are not equal to those who die. Europe has not heard. And it is a pity, not because China has many things in which to be an example. For example, it is not an example in the defense of freedom, including religious freedom, but at least in this it is given an example to the world. Why don't those old socialist, communist, and outdated European and Latin American socialists and communists who consider that killing the child and the elderly is the best solution to end the problems, learn this lesson from China? To kill the child is to kill the future. China's example should be imitated by all. See you next week, God willing.
If you wish to keep up to date about what is happening in the church, you can follow us in our website, www.magnifica.tv. See you next week, God's willing.